Hi everyone and welcome to topic 4A part 1 where we talk about leading change. Remember those 7 important questions that we looked at earlier in the course? Well, the one I want you to think about as we go through this topic is, are leaders more often about orchestrating change? Think about that and reflect on that in your portfolio. In fact, use those 7 questions right throughout your portfolio to think about the issues around leadership. New Zealand's change path has been fairly dramatic over the last 40 years. We started off in the 1980s with a lot of external environmental change around the value of our dollar. We've had a huge growth in the service sector and a large change in employment relationships with the Employment Contracts Act and so on, all the other legislation that's come since then. As well, in the 1990s, we ended up with government intervention in sport because of the professionalising of sport and the lack of distinction between professionalism and amateurism. We also had a big change in non-profit sports organisations, a lot of new roles and a professionalising of the whole sector of administration, as well as the professionalisation of sport and thinking about elite athletes and the management of those people. A lot of impact on people with new opportunities and a great deal of uncertainty, certainly no real opportunity to have a job for life. Organisations in general have had to sort of break themselves down into component parts so that you remember whenever there's strategic change that has got to be integrated with all parts of the business, whether that's actually your business or whether it's a vast chain. So thinking about how Regal and Slocum in relation to change and how complex that's become is probably a worthwhile thing to reflect on. Since the 2000s, we've had a lot more personal responsibility expected of all of us, so thinking more about the me than the we. Service sector is now a major growth sector and sports is also a major growth area within that. We've got more pressure on athlete performance and high performance, as well as a shorter time that athletes are at their peak at the top. And complete retraining for any of us is now actually a common and if not expected thing. Most of you guys will probably have at least 4 careers in your lifetime, whereas in your grandparents' lifetime you probably would have had 1. So thinking further about that, how Regal and Slocum's diagram of diagnostic change, just thinking about how all these particular issues impact on everything else that you do in the organisation, just remembering the complexity of the world that we live in. It's a particularly useful model to think through change, but also to think about what you are changing about yourself, so actually apply it on an individual basis. And remember the centre point of culture in that. Also, there have been some big changes in the workforce itself. We've got more diversity, and that's diversity of gender, of ethnicity, of age, of life stage, of lifestyle, of sexuality, of marital status, and all those other things. Dual career families are becoming a really normal thing, and so you need to plan your life around whether you have children or not. There's also a lot more contingent workforce, and by contingent workforce that might be either highly skilled people or low skilled people, because you may be a chemical engineer that specialises in petroleum drilling, but actually you probably won't get much of your life working in New Zealand. You'll have to travel in order to actually keep developing your professional skill, just as much as someone who has very low skills will have to keep moving around in their job because the workforce itself is becoming more highly skilled. The workforce in general is better educated and less unionised than it was 40 years ago. That growth in the service sector, which I've talked about before, but just remember the skill sets are different, so you need to train yourself in the right skills for each sector. Technology and work relationships have changed hugely over the last 40 years. The internet has been a big driver for that. Changing values and expectations of the workforce with that cult of the individual. We all expect to be able to do better things for ourselves, and where wealth is accumulating globally. Big changes.